Honestly, the more I listen to Slipknot, the more I just love them. Now, I've already talked about their debut album and Iowa, and I really enjoyed them both. I really enjoyed the self-titled album, and I just loved Iowa. I thought it was amazing. But today, I'm going to listen to Volume 3, the Subliminal Verses. I think I'm saying that correctly. It is, of course, their third album, therefore why it's called Volume 3. And I'm insanely excited to listen to this album because I'm pretty sure it's going to be my favorite. I know a lot of people have this as a favorite. I don't like the die-hard Slipknot fans say Iowa is the best, but from what I know of the album, I feel like this one will be my favorite. And one of my good friends on here, his name is Fritzky on YouTube, we've made a video before. We sometimes talk about Slipknot. You can see him in my comments of some of these videos, and he said that this one is one of his all-time favorite albums, so I'm very excited here. I do know two of the songs on here because I've reacted to them both, and those songs are Duality and Before I Forget, probably some of my favorite songs of all time. And the album came out May 25th, 2004. There are 14 songs on here. It's an hour long, and those songs are Prelude 3.0, The Blister Exists, 3-0, Duality, Opium of the People, Circle, Welcome, Vermilion, Pulse of the Maggots, Before I Forget, Vermilion Part 2, Bloodstone Mix, The Nameless, The Virus of Life, Danger, Keep Away. Now I'm very excited, and I know that something cool with this album that Corey Taylor did is that all the critics were like, oh, Corey Taylor can't write without swearing. So on this album, he, I think, only put like 2 swear words on it, but there's no use of fuck. There's nothing like that. I think there's like 1 or 2 of them in Duality, and maybe that's it. So that's interesting. I'm going to see how that turns out with the album. Maybe it'll disappoint me, but I highly doubt it because I'm loving everything I've heard from Slipknot so far. So I'll be back in about an hour. So Volume 3 was everything I wanted it to be. I love this album, and I'd say it's probably my favorite one right now because I feel like compared to the other two, which again are great albums in their own way, but this one really seems like the most cohesive album. And maybe that is because a lot of the songs do flow into the next one, but I felt that there was a really good balance amongst the songs, maybe except for like one part in one of the songs, but even that's like a stretch. I really did love this album. In the future, I could definitely see my rating changing and maybe even going higher, but I did really love this album. I actually enjoyed every single track on here. There were ones that I could say, yeah, sure, they're weaker, but the only reason they're weaker is because they don't stick with me as much. They don't stick with me as much as the other ones, but there wasn't really a certain moment here where I was like, oh yeah, this was the weakest part, because on the other two, on the self-titled one in Iowa, I was like able to point out like 1 or 2 songs that I was like, okay, these ones to me were the weakest ones, but this one just really worked so well because there was this great flow of the super heavy stuff that obviously they got super famous for. I said super twice, but there's actually also acoustic songs on here. I think there's 2 or 3, and they're beautiful. They're some of the best tracks on here, and I love the mix of it because it'll go from a super heavy song to the slow acoustic song, and sometimes in the same song, the drums will build up, and Joey Jordan said it's just, God, he's top 5 drummers of all time. That man was just an absolute god with the drum set. It was just insane what he can do, and Corey Taylor's vocals are amazing. And something I also really noticed here was Sid and his whole like the DJ mixing and all this. I thought it really worked for the most part. I think maybe there was a few moments, but it wasn't with him. It was with the microphones they used with Corey, because they're very different, and sometimes his voice is lower in the mix, but then it let people like Sid shine with mixing some of the stuff, and a lot of it's like choppy, but it's purposely choppy. It's not like a bad, you know, in movies that have like choppy editing, it's annoying. It's not like that. It works in a good way. It's used for like an artistic effect, and for me it really worked. I will say my 2 favorite songs are still Duality and Before I Forget, and I know a lot of people will be attacking me for that. I apologize. Well, actually, I don't really apologize because it's my opinion, but they're just 2 of my favorite songs of all time, and they work so well on this album, but also on their own. And I feel like I will listen to this album more than the other 2 because, I don't know, maybe it's just because, yes, it is a physically easier album to listen to because it's not as heavy as the other ones, and I don't have a problem with that, obviously, but there's just something about this album that really, you know, something that spoke to me about it, and there were definitely some songs that there was a lot of emotion in them, and I really appreciated that. But now let's jump into the track list. So it kicks off with Prelude 3.0. Obviously, you know, it's quite obvious what that means. Now the other 2 albums started off with like just a ton of numbers, especially the first one just had a ton of numbers. This one is just simple. It's Prelude 3.0. Really cool opening, really atmospheric, sets the tone for majority of the album. I thought it worked really well, and compared to the one from Iowa, it's a lot more calmer because it isn't someone having a breakdown, but just like the other ones, it's just the intro to it. It's not so much of a song as compared to every other song on here. And then The Blister Exists is actually a very good song. It's one of the longest ones, I think second longest one on here, and really works well for me. Not one of my absolute favorites, not one that really stands out to me, but it keeps out that heavy noise just like 3-0. And these ones work well together because, you know, they're both some of the heaviest songs on this album, and they're just right after each other. And 3-0, there were definitely moments here that really stuck with me, especially the end of the song when, you know, we finally go 3-0 and like starts, and that wasn't it exactly, but it's like 1, 2, 3-0 and something like that. I think it really worked well. And then Duality is still the best song on the album. I don't care what you guys say, it is the best song on the album. Let's be completely honest. I mean, everything about this song is perfect. Corey Taylor's screams are amazing. My favorite part of this song, and probably my favorite part of any Slipknot song, is like kind of like the bridge leading into the end of the song where, you know, it starts off with all I got is insane, but it's the end of that, and then when his scream fills like that little break and all the instruments kind of drop off, and then it goes back into the chorus. I just love that. I just think it's amazing. And then Opium of the People was a song that I was going to be like, okay, is this just a filler there? And I know that wasn't proper English what I just said there, but no, it was a lot more than that. And yes, it is kind of stuck in between this song and this amazing song, which we'll talk about in a minute, so maybe it doesn't stick with me as much because of that, but it still is a great song. And Circle is probably my third favorite on the album. It could actually no, I was gonna say it could jump up a little bit. It probably won't, but it's one of my favorite Slipknot songs because it's the first acoustic one on here, but it feels so personal, kind of like Snuff. Now, not to the same degree as Snuff. Snuff is, again, one of the best songs I've ever heard, probably, especially from Slipknot, but this one really reminded me of it because it's a slower song. It has acoustic guitar. I'm pretty sure Snuff has it, or clean, but it sounds like acoustic, whatever, and it just works so well. The lyrics really hit, and that's what I love about this album, is because, as I said in Iowa, there are many moments where the lyrics kind of hit you a little bit, but here it's like cranked up to this whole other level of like personally cranked up to a whole other level, if that's how I'm supposed to say it. And then Welcome is one that I basically feel the same about. It's another really beautiful song, very, very different from what I would expect, and that's kind of how it works with these songs here. They're different than what you would expect, but they work so well, and I'm grouping them together, and typically I don't, but like I do kind of feel the same way about these three songs. Now, they're not all exactly similar. I can't remember exactly if these two have acoustic guitar. I know for sure one does. I totally forget which is which. And then Pulse of the Maggots is another one that's like, it's almost a good anthem for Slipknot. I really like that. Now, they do have a bunch of great anthems. It kind of slightly reminded me of People Equal Shit from Iowa. Now, again, I probably would say I prefer People Equal Shit, but I still think this is a great song. It's one that really stood out to me when it comes to like the heavier songs. I think it's my favorite of the heaviest songs on the album, excluding Duality and Before I Forget. And talking about Before I Forget, it comes up next, and it's just like this perfect mix. I mean, it definitely starts off and it's heavier because Duality starts off with I push my fingers into my, and then like, you know, that's different. But Before I Forget starts off with stapled shot, and it's just like totally different, and I love the mix. And then when the chorus comes, I mean, I've watched this song performed live a bunch of times on YouTube, and I just love it. It's like and the crowd singing, "I'm a world before I am a man." I just think it's perfect here. And then Vermilion Part 2, Bloodstone, the mix doesn't really matter. I just read it out twice there. I honestly might have preferred this one to the first one, maybe just a little bit. I'm not 100% sure, but this one I know for sure had the acoustic guitar, which again works so well on this album. Like, you wouldn't expect it on a new metal album that you have a few songs with acoustic guitar, yet it still works so well, and they're some of the best songs on the album. And The Nameless is a very good song. It's again heavier. It kind of kicks up the energy once again. It's again not one of my favorites on the album, but it still is a great song, and it feels necessary. And that's what I love about this album, is that every single song feels necessary for it to be cohesive and everything. And then The Virus of Life is one of those songs where I think Sid really stands out because it has has, you know, that microphone effect that I talked about with Corey Taylor, where I don't know if it's EQing his vocals or whatever, lo-fi, whatever you want to call it, but it sounds like he's using a different microphone, and he's a lot quieter in the mix, but it works for me. Normally I hate when you can't hear the singer, or like can't hear one specific thing, like the guitar is buried or something, you know what I mean? Yet in this situation it worked well because it was a song more about everything else, but by the end, you know, when they're singing about the virus of life, I just think it works so well. And then it finishes off with Danger Keep Away, which was probably in my top, it's definitely in the top half of the album. Well, we can't speak there. I mean, there's 14 songs on here. It's definitely in the top half. I really love this one. This one, again, felt so personal, a lot like Circle. Now, Circle is one that, as I was listening to it, I instantly looked it up, and I'm going to do the same with Danger. I mean, the album did just end, so that's why I'm talking about it now. I do want to look this up, and if you know stuff about the songs, please tell me down below. I love this song, and I loved this album. I knew it was going to be my favorite, and I would say from right now, where I stand on all the albums, this one was my favorite. It was the most consistent out of all of them. It flowed so nicely, not only because some of the songs flowed together, but I just loved the mix of it. And there was also one song, I think it might have been The Nameless, possibly The Virus of Life. It was one of the songs that came after Before I Forget, which Corey Taylor almost sounds a little bit like Billy Joe Armstrong of Green Day in like the chorus in one part. I don't know, that's just a little observation I made. I probably should be more specific on what song that is. I just think that's funny. But what is your favorite song from Volume 3, the Subliminal Verses? I love this whole era. I love Corey Taylor's masks too, with like the colorful hair and stuff, and the stitches and everything. I just think it's really cool. And tell me any other fun facts. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Over and out.